Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how to use actionable messages in Microsoft Outlook with Power Automate. With Power Automate we are able to send an actionable message to Outlook. But what is an actionable message? If you are not familiar with that topic, it's basically an extension of an adaptive card. Along with the classic submit button, there is another button which is able to trigger a URL, and this opens a door to many other scenarios. Imagine that you want to trigger from your actionable message. You want to trigger, for example, a Power Automate flow, another one, or a logic app, or just an Azure function HTTP trigger, for example. So this cool scenario can be covered with an actionable message. Now I walk you through every step how to set up an actionable message in your organization and then send it through Microsoft Outlook using Power Automate. Let's get started. Here I am in Teams. I have here a normal SharePoint list embedded. I recreated this list by using an existing template, which is the Asset Manager. The idea here is every time that a user adds a new entry here, a new item, this triggers a Power Automate flow that sends an actionable message in Outlook, and every approver can decide if approve or reject. And then finally, the asset is assigned to the requester. That's it. Let me demo immediately how it works, this process. Let's start to create a new item here. I'm going just to add some field here. Microsoft, the model is Surface Studio, let's say 2, asset type, laptop, color, black, and that's it. For the first request, this is fine. I'm going to click on save, and now on top I have this request. Now, let's see in Outlook if a new email comes. Down below I have a browser instance with a user, which is in this case Adele Events. Adele Events is one of the approver for this process. This process is called a device self-service because theoretically everyone in the organization is able to request a new asset or a new device. I will not focus on the front end and how the user can submit a new request. I just used a normal list. I want to focus on the entire process. Now, Adele Events as approver has got an email here. This is an actionable message. Now, here on top I have some description, new device, Surface Studio 2 laptop requested, new device requested from the user Giuliano de Luca. Now, here I have to take my decision. I'm going to approve this request, and then I have to, this is a required field, I have to provide a description here. This is required. In fact, if I click on submit, I can see validation up and running that tell me required field. So let me type just something. It's fine. And then let's click on submit. Now the actionable message refresh, and I have a message here. Thanks for submitting your request. These are all users that are involved in this process, so they are approvers. That means that another approver that will open this email should see that someone else has already approved. So this is the wish scenario, okay? And this is exactly what I'm going to show you. So I have here another user, Diego Siciliani, which is included in this email. And if I open right now the mailbox of Diego Siciliani, and if I click on the last email got, I can see that now the adaptive card refresh, the actionable message refresh, and I can see now another message. The request number 16 has been approved by Adele Events. So this is pretty cool because the request has been already processed. This is a very great scenario. Now let me go back in Microsoft Teams and let me see the last request, which is this one. If I go on the right, I can see that now the request is approved by Adele Events. So the actionable message has triggered another Power Automate flow that has changed the value in this SharePoint list item. Let's see the mobile experience. Here I am on my Android device. I have Outlook open. I just got this email, new device Surface Laptop Studio requested. I can then approve or reject directly from my smartphone. I can type, for example, just OK and then submit. Now I show you some trick how you can build such process. So let's get started step by step. Here I am in make.powerautomate.com and I am connected with my service user. I'm going to create now a new flow, the first one that we are going to use for this process. All I need to do is just an automated cloud flow, and then I can type the name, request devices. I'm going to use as a trigger when an item is created in SharePoint. Then let's click on create. And now I can start to target the site collection that I cannot see here. I'm going to add manually the URL and it is this one. Okay. Then I'm going to target the list, which is device self-service. And then I can move with the second action. I'm going to use a compose action to create an actionable message. Let me rename it properly. Compose actionable message. Now in input, I'm going to paste the adaptive card that I created. Now let me show you this adaptive card in the designer in adaptivecard.io. That's the website, designer, and then here in this page I can paste the adaptive card that I used before. Now let me paste the adaptive card that I just used before. So I'm going to choose also the right host app, which is Outlook Actionable Messages. Short overview about this actionable message. This is just a test block, and I have here other additional text blocks. Now I want to highlight the input choice set here that I placed. I have 3 different choices here: approve, reject, and more info needed. This is the style is expanded. You can change the style as you want, and then it's very important to define an ID so I can take the value selected from the user later. Initially visible, and then there is this other input text for the comments. I have defined it here as well an ID, comments, very important, so I'm able to take the value written down from the user in this field. And then I added also required, and I defined a field required, an error message, just a generic message. So that's it. And the last one is the action set. It is an action.http, and this is exactly the particularity and the capability of an actionable message. You are able to trigger another service, which could be, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, could be a logic app, could be a Power Automate flow, could be an Azure function, HTTP trigger, whatever service in the cloud. Now here I defined the title, which is title submit. The style is default. The method is post. Here I have the URL. We are going to replace this later. I show you what URL you have to place there. And then the body. This is very important. What I have here is this JSON. So that means that when the user click on the button submit, call this URL and make a post sending this JSON, sending this option, then the options.value. This property define exactly the value or the option selected by the user, if approve, reject, or more info needed. Comments.value with the curly brackets, double curly brackets on the left and on the right. We are able to take the current value of the comments defined from the user. And then there is another parameter. This is a hidden parameter, let's call it in this way. It's not a text box in this adaptive card. It's just a value that we send with the post request. And this contains the ID of the list item in the SharePoint list. This is very important so we can make some validation later. Then, as a HTTP headers, what we have here is an authorization. In the value you have to leave it blank, and then content type application.json, because we are going to send a JSON. Don't forget this HTTP headers, otherwise you will get an access denied error. So that's it. This is the adaptive card. It's ready to go. And let me go back now to the Power Automate flow. I already copied this, but this is not finished. There are something that we have to change. First of all, we have to change the URL, because this is not the URL that we are going to call it. I'm going to use another Power Automate flow for this demo, but feel free to use a Logic app or an Azure Function HTTP trigger. It's up to you. Of course, with Power Automate, you have some limitation in terms of licenses, because a Power Automate flow HTTP trigger requires a premium license, and if you don't have, you can opt for a Logic app, for example, which is cheaper. Then I have the header defined here, exactly what we have seen before. In the body we are going to send this JSON. This is the ID of the list item just added. Here again we have to remove this URL. Now let me highlight a little bit this part. This is very important. This is how to invoke action. This is where the magic happens. So basically, as I mentioned, when an approver processes a request, another approver involved in this kind of process should see the refreshed and updated step in the process. This avoids mistakes by typing or making some selection on an adaptive card, which is already made from another user. So in this case, a second, a third, or an alternative approver should see an updated situation. And how we can do that? There is this property called autoInvokeAction. This call the URL that you define here, you are able to pass a JSON, for example, and with that steps, we are able, every time that another approver opens the email, we are able to invoke our process, our service, and in that specific step, we are able to check the current status of the request. So we can send back an updated actionable message to the second approver by informing him that the request has been already approved. That's it. So now, another important property that I want to highlight here is the originator. So I'm going to delete this one because I used this for my demo, and I'm going to show you how you can create a new originator, which is essential if you want to target Outlook, because the originator validates the URL that you are going to use. This is for security reason. We are able to say that in Exchange, we want to call a specific URL from Outlook using Actionable Message. Okay, so that's it from an adaptive card and an Actionable Message perspective. Now I'm going to create another step, another action. This time I'm going to add another compose action. We have to wrap up the actionable message in a script tag. And in the input, I'm going to pass this thing. So in this tag, I'm going to add the outputs of the previous action, compose actionable message. Now that I embedded this actionable message in this script tag, I can send it through Outlook. So I'm going to call Outlook 365, and then I'm going to type send an email version 2. And here we have to target the approvers. We can also target a Microsoft 365 group, for example. Now let me define some approver. I'm going to add Adele Evans, Diego Siciliani, Nestor Wilkie. That's it. That's enough. Here we can define a subject, new device requested. And now here, another thing very important, you don't need to add the outputs as is in this body, but you have to jump in the code view mode. So I'm going to delete these elements. And now here I'm going to trigger the dynamic value panel, and I'm able now to add the outputs coming from wrap up actionable message. Don't forget that thing, otherwise you are going to send this adaptive card as a plain text and will not work. Now, in this way, I am sure that I'm sending to the three approvers this actionable message. So I can save for the moment this thing, but it's not completed because in the compose actionable message action, we have to refresh and update the URL, the right URL that we are going to call, and the originator. Now, before to create the URL and the originator, I have to create another Power Automate flow. Let's go in my flow. Let me click on new flow, and then I'm going to click on instant cloud flow. Let me define a name here, process device request. At the very bottom, you can find when an HTTP request is received. I'm going to use this trigger. Let me click on the button create, and now this Power Automate flow is ready to go. Remember that this requires a premium license for that specific trigger. So if you don't have a premium license, maybe you should opt for a Logic app, which is cheaper, or an Azure function, or another service in the cloud that could be triggered using a URL. Now, just down below, I'm going to add just a simple action in order to save this Power Automate flow and to take the URL. Now, let me add a compose action. And here I'm going to decode the authorization bearer in the header. This because for security reason, every request coming from the actionable message will contain a bearer token in the header. In this way we can check and we can be sure that the request is coming from an actionable message from Outlook. So let me type now in a name for this step. Decode authorization bearer header, and in the inputs I'm going to add a function that I already copied before, and this is the function that I'm going to use. Basically, I'm going to split the token, the first part of the token, and I'll show you the parameter and properties that contain this token. Okay, the first part is done, and this means that we are able to save this Power Automate flow, take the URL, and fill out the missing parameter in the previous Power Automate flow. Let me copy now the URL, and I can go back on my flows in request devices. I can now add this URL. Going in the compose actionable message, there is the URL property, and I can now paste the URL. So we are going to invoke and call this other Power Automate flow HTTP trigger. Voila, we are ready. The last thing to complete this first Power Automate flow is the originator. Now, as I mentioned, the originator, it's a GUID that will give you the chance to use properly in your Microsoft 365 environment a service. Now, how we can get the originator? There is a site. It is called outlook.office.com connectors/publish. Let me go on this page. This is the dashboard in Outlook where every user can request for an originator in specifying a URL. So by doing that, we can use and work with actionable messages in Outlook. Now I'm going to create another provider. I'm going to define a friendly name. This is the originator that I can already take. Let me go back in the previous Power Automate flow. The first one, I'm going to pass the originator, but we have to request now. We have to perform this request. The sender email address for which actionable messages will originate. The sender, as I mentioned, is my service user that I'm using here. So I can go back in this dashboard and now I can add this user that will send the email. Let me pass the service user email, the target URL, which is absolutely important. It is the previous URL that I copied coming from the second Power Automate flow, the HTTP trigger, to be precise. Then you can add another action URL if you want, but we have just one. And finally, we have a public key. If you want to add more security to this process, you can define even a logo. And then down below there is the scope of submission. This is very important. If you are developing some process and you want to just build up a proof of concept, you can opt for the test user, and this will auto-approve immediately the request, and you will be able to play with this actionable message with a specific email address. But if you are ready to roll out this service in your organization, you have to target then organization. Moreover, if you are an ISV, an independent software vendor, and you are selling your Power Automate flow or your Logic app or your process to other companies, then you can opt for global. So in this way, this URL and this originator can be used in every tenant. Now I'm rolling out this service in my company, then I'm going to target organization. Finally, the last step to do is to define an email address that we want to notify with this request. Okay, I added the admin. I can add some comment if I want. I'm going to leave it blank, accept the terms and condition, and then I can click on save. With this request, once it's approved, I can start to play with the actionable message. Now, let me go on Outlook as Giuliano. Let's see this request coming. I have a new request. I can click on View Submission, and this opens the dashboard that we have seen before, but the URL is different. It's always outlook.office connectors OM, but I have /admin. This is the view for an admin. I can see the current status, it's pending approval. I can type something here, okay, and then I can click on approve. This request is approved. Request devices can be used in my Power Automate flow. I am back in make.powerautomate.com with the service user. I added the originator, which is now approved and it's trusted that we can use it with this URL. Now let me go back, and for the first Power Automate flow we have done, I'm going right now to work with the second flow, which is process device request. Let me edit this Power Automate flow, and it's time now to add more things and actions in this flow. I'm going to click on next step, and then I'm going to add another compose action. That operation, and it is another compose action. In the input, clicking on add expression, I'm going to paste this expression, and as you can see here, I'm going to read the bearer token coming from the request, from the post request, and I'm going to take the second part of the token. Okay, let me click on save. Now that I have defined this to think, let me name properly this thing. Now this Power Automate flow is saved. Decode authorization bearer payload. Voila. Now I'm going to save this, and before to build up additional steps, I want to show you this token, how it looks like and what you have to do with this token. This is very important because, as I mentioned, for security reason, this token, it gives you the chance to make some tests if the request is coming internally from Microsoft 365 or outside. So it's a nice way to be sure that the request is trusted and is safe. Here I am in another Power Automate flow. Let me go in my flows. I have here another flow. This is just to show you how it works, this authorization token. Now opening here the HTTP request action and clicking on show rows, there is here the action authorization which contain the bearer token. Now I highlighted this token and here I have another tab open. This token is the JSON web token that you get. And if you go on this website, jwt.io, you are able to encode your token. So I can, for example, paste here my token. And in this token are contained 3 different parts. We can define it. So we have the first part, this thing, which is the header of the authorization, and it contains these properties. In the second part, which is the part that I'm going to decode and to reuse later, it contains several other information. We have the app ID, so the application that is performing the request. Then we have the sender, which is the service user that I used to build up the Power Automate flow and to send the actionable message. And finally, we have very important another one, which is sub. This is the user that has opened the actionable message, that has just opened the actionable message or maybe has clicked on the button submit. So with that information, you are able then to process the request and to store the data or update the data in SharePoint, in Dataverse, whatever you want. Now that I defined the meaning of this token, we are able to go back in Power Automate and to continue to build up our flow. What I really need is the payload of my bearer token, because this contains the user that has opened the actionable message or the user that has clicked on the button submit. Now let's go back. Let's click on this tab. Here I have the token that I was building. Let's go with another action. I'm going now to parse the JSON from the previous step. Let me rename it authorization bearer payload. I'm going to take the output from the previous step, and in the schema I'm going to place this JSON schema. So I have the sub here, which is the user that has submitted the actionable message, and I have several other information. Next step, for the validation, I'm going to add a condition here, and here I'm going to use an expression, which is this one. Let me close. With this expression, I'm going to check comments. If this is empty, so then using the expression panel and typing true. So if comments is empty, so then we have an issue of validation. Then let's add another group. I can then use the expression trigger body option. And this is not equal to autoInvoke. We are in the yes case, and then here I'm going to provide a response. Response, which is in premium as well, this one, and I'm going to return a different status, HTTP status. The status will be 406, which is a validation error. And in the header, very important, I have to define card action status so that the status will be changed and updated. And here we have to provide the validation error. This is the message that we are going to send back if we are in this case. Now let's move in the if no case. Here I have to handle two different cases. The auto-invoke, so when a user open an actionable message, and then when the approver approve or reject the request. So first of all, I need to use the connector SharePoint because I have to get the item. So let me select SharePoint and then get item, this one. Site address, that's the URL. Okay, now I can select the list. It should shows up. Here we go. Device self-service. The ID, I already know this comes from the request. This comes in the post request JSON. I have to add this expression. I'm going to convert this string in an int because this is a column which contains a numeric value, and I'm going to read the body of the request with this property AC_ID. This is defined as the ID of the text block in the actionable message in the adaptive card. Okay, I added this thing as well. And now I'm going to add another control, which is in this case a switch control, because here I want to check the output if this is a request that has been approved, rejected, or if this is an auto-invoke. Let me add this other expression. Trigger body, open parentheses, closes parentheses, question mark, square bracket, single quote, option. And voila. Now I have the option here, and here I can add, if we are in the case of auto-invoke, or let me add another one, or approve. Now let's go with auto-invoke. You can even add another one if you want to differentiate the behavior. We have, for example, reject. So you can do another thing here. Let's say that is in the auto-invoke, we have to send back and refresh the actionable message, informing the user that probably the request has been already approved. Let's add another condition. Let me rename this condition. If the request status is requested. So here I can take, coming from the get item, the request. Let me search so we are faster. Request status value. If this is not equal to requested, it means that has been approved or rejected. Then we can update and refresh the actionable message. Let me add another action. I have to prepare another actionable message that will replace the previous one. For that case, I'm going to use another compose action. Compose. I'm going to rename it, not comment, it's renew. Refresh actionable message for auto-invoke. And luckily I have already prepared the adaptive card to send back. This is just a normal adaptive card with this text block. The request number, the ID coming from the request has been approved by. Here let's add the decision taken from the user, which is contained in the decision field in SharePoint. Decision display name, it's perfect, has been approved by, and then we have the user that has approved this. In the last step of this if yes branch, I'm going then to send a response, and this will refresh the adaptive card in the body of the email. 200 is the status, is the card status. This is the response for auto-invoke. In the header, absolutely important, you have to provide this property, card update in body, and then here true. In this way, in Outlook, the service will know that the actionable message must be updated. And then here in the body, I'm going to provide the output coming from the refresh actionable message for autoinvoke. Now, this part is completed. To bring an end this Power Automate flow, we have to update the list item and we have to send back to the approver refreshed actionable message, and we have done. Let's go now in the approve case, and here let's start to add a compose because I have to update the adaptive card in case the approver approves the request. Let me paste here this adaptive card. I'm going to rename this refresh actionable message for approve. Then here in the text of the text block, I'm going to add a variable, and in this case it's the name of the approver, so the person that is interacting with the actionable message. And now we have to send this actionable message. Now let me search for the response action. I have to return something. Down below I have the response, which is in premium, so these are all things that you have to consider. Response, update adaptive card for approve, 200 is the status that I want to return. Again, the property in the header card update in body, absolutely important to refresh the actionable message. And now here I can select the refresh actionable message for approve, the outputs. It looks good here. Now in the last action, I'm going to update the list item. Let me type update. I have short point connector here. Then let me type again on update item. Here we go. I have to select again the website. I added the website, list, device self-service. To be consistent, I will use the same property in the expression trigger body AC underscore ID that comes from the request, from the post request. The title, I can reuse the same coming from the get item. This is required. I have to specify just required field. What happens here? Basically, the request is approved. And in the decision claims, I have to add the person who has decided. It's very easy in the expression. I can, let's use the dynamic value. Here I have just to type sub, and this comes from the var token, and voila, I made. For the approval, it's done. I'm going to do the same for reject. Now to speed up things, I just cloned the 3 steps that we have seen before, adding and removing the text and changing the text here because it's specific for this use case. Here we have a rejection and the status will be rejected, and this is the Power Automate flow ready to go. I can save, and now I can enjoy this process. Alright, we have seen in this tutorial how to use actionable messages in Microsoft Outlook. If you enjoyed this video, as always, please consider to subscribe, like, comment. I hope to see you next time.